Hi, everybody. My name is
Hey,
Carrie Hyde, and Lori, you're going to go ahead and explain. We have attendees coming in.
Hello,
Oh,
everybody. Welcome. Real quick, before we get started, those of you that are new to Zoom meetings, I just want to let you know that at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen, there is a little icon that says Q&A on it. If you click that, you are able to type in your questions. Carrie Hyde, the SPA, is our host. She will read off your questions to our panelists for the answers. You can also utilize the chat to post your questions as well. Everybody is muted other than the panelists, so please type in your questions. Thank you so much.
okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I'm going to do a quick little introduction to you so you'll know who you're speaking with. My name is Carrie Hyde. I am the owner of the SPA, and I'm located in Tustin, California. I was a veterinarian technician for 12 years, and I've owned my current business right now for 21 years. And I started this podcast called the Spawdcast, now you know the connection, to help just enlighten people a little bit about the pet industry. And that's how I met our very lovely guest, Scott Fine. Scott, unfortunately, I met him because he lost his dog to veterinary malpractice. And that's been something that I have personally witnessed. And I've also been, I say this all the time, I've been on both sides because I have been accused of the death of an animal, and I have also witnessed what I consider the death of an animal due to negligence from a veterinarian. So I, just like Scott, am not here to say that all veterinarians are bad, because I would never want that to happen, but I also know that it does happen. And so this is why I've decided to get really involved with Scott and Joey's legacy, because I believe in it. I think change needs to happen. And so we're going to be doing these every couple of weeks. We're still debating on what days we're going to be doing them, but this is something that we're so excited to be able to bring to you, and I'm so glad that you are all here. We have so many participants, so I first just want to let Scott talk for a few minutes. So please welcome Scott Fine to the show. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Carrie?
I'm great.
So we lost our Joey back in, actually next month will be 4 years. We decided to start this nonprofit organization to try to assist others that whose pets met the same fate. We quickly learned that there were lots of allegations out there, and some were valid, many were not. We decided to put together a team of veterinarians and animal law attorneys. That was back toward the end of 2017. I started doing the last 100 members that joined our Facebook group. They answered some pre-approval questions. The first one was, have you ever had a bad experience with a veterinarian? Very consistently, 80 to 90 out of the 100 said, no, never had a bad experience. And I'm only here to learn what I can from those who have, so I could better advocate for my loved one. And it's been very consistent over the years that ratio has held. Out of the 15 or out of 100 that have said that they've had a bad experience, anywhere from adverse reaction to topicals, all the way to allegations of negligence that cause permanent injury or death. We see about 10 to 15 inquiries a month. Out of those 10 to 15, probably 7 or so those allegations are sustained by our vet team. The rest are basically nothing to see here. It's just pet parents that were so overwhelmed by emotion that they were lashing out, trying to attach blame to the veterinarian when there was no reason for it. So anyway, that's how we got started. We're now, like I said, addressing 10 to 15 inquiries a month. Those pet parents are referred to our veterinarians for review of the case. If the veterinarian determines that they believe negligence did occur, they'll offer to write an opinion letter, which is then sent to one of our attorneys in the state where the negligence allegedly occurred. And that's pretty much the process for seeking justice as far, pardon me, as far as Joey's legacy goes. And we have right now 2,300 members, but again, probably about 300 or more are believe they are victims of negligence. The rest are just here to learn.
So Scott brought in, we obviously needed to really talk about this and get this out to the media as much as we can. And so that's where Jerry came in, correct?
Correct. I was having, oh, I'm sorry.
So let's talk to Jerry for a few minutes. Jerry, sure. So Jerry's the author of the book, Joey's Legacy. Jerry, how did you guys connect? What made you decide to write the books?
I had written a series of books, a 7-book series that one of Scott's friends had read and befriended me. Also lived in Fort Myers, and he introduced me to Scott by sending Scott one of my books. Scott is pleasantly persistent. He called me. I was right in the middle of another book, and he asked me if I would consider writing about Joey's legacy, which I'd never heard of. I never even knew this was a problem at that time. This was July of last year. So I told him that I would do that as soon as I finished this other novel, which would take me about 6 months. But like I said, he was pleasantly persistent. I'm on my 6th Great Dane. I love animals. I've had skunks. I've had all kinds of stuff in my life. So I figured God was sending me a message, and I decided I would write the book. And it's been a real eye-opener. I thought it would probably be my shortest book because I only expected about 15 stories, but I got about 60, and we put 41 in the first.
Unfortunately, I bet you could continue to write these books for years, unfortunately, unless we continue to do something. Right?
I'm on volume 2 now, which I hope to finish the manuscript this month.
Yeah.
And there will probably be a volume 3 because there's an awful lot of stories out there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So our next 2 guests, Joey's Legacy couldn't continue without our next 2 guests, which I'm so excited. And I'm meeting them actually for the first time here, just like the rest of you are. So I'm just really excited actually to talk to Dr. Cannizzaro. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm located in Brooksville, Florida, so we're trying not to be too toasty here. Not sure everybody else is, but I saw this was starting on Pacific time. So anyway, I'm geared up this evening to be with you. I'm a homeopathic holistic veterinarian, and early on in my veterinary career, I sort of happened upon natural or holistic medicine, and it really resonated with me. So I took the International Veterinary Acupuncture course, which is a professional veterinary acupuncture course. And then I took Dr. Pitcairn's professional veterinary homeopathy course. And then I've studied with some human homeopaths as well over time. So the majority of what I do is homeopathic medicine. And like you, I've been on both sides of the aisle. And sadly, homeopathic veterinarians are bigger targets than just allopathic or traditional veterinarians. And so there's trouble on both sides, unfortunately. And there are a lot of really good vets that are out there. And then there's definitely some things that go on that really shouldn't. But I think a huge problem that we have is that, if I'm not offending anybody in allopathic or traditional medicine, is that many of the traditional medicine treatments, because of the nature of them, they're not curative, and many of them have really serious side effects, which is also true in human medicine, that we can be set up, even in allopathic medicine, for people being upset or angry. And I think one of my biggest concerns in my profession is that we as veterinarians are responsible for knowing what the side effects and the potential difficulties are with these drugs, which I don't use, and they should be discussed with clients, and many times it isn't. So when there is an issue against a veterinarian, almost 100% of the time, a great portion of it has to do with a breakdown in communication. And none of us are perfect at communication. So all of us can do better in communication, including myself. So it is a challenge. It's a big challenge for all of us. So I'm very blessed in what I do. I work out of my home office. I'm actually sitting in it. And I do exclusively homeopathic holistic medicine. So I welcome any questions that anybody may have around that. It's safer, no side effects. And even though I can't cure every patient I come in contact with, I certainly cure many, many more than I ever did with allopathic or traditional medicine.
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing to have veterinarians willing to step up, you know, because it's scary to be able to come out and say, look, there's a problem and it needs to be solved when you have the big guys. So we're just so blessed to have you here and be willing to say, hey, there's a problem and we should probably start addressing it. So thank you for that. Jeremy, we can't do this without the lawyers, right? We know that the rest of us are all animal lovers, and perhaps you are too, but how did you become the Boston dog lawyer?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question and the invite. Imagine that 11 minutes in and a lawyer still hadn't said a word. That's a long time for me to go without talking. There's so much I wanted to say. It hit close to home. A number of years ago, a dog that belonged to an extension of my family was accused of biting. And I went to the hearing, and the local hearing, if a dog bites, city or town has a hearing, and they voted without ever meeting the dog or evaluating the dog to euthanize Jesse. And I just couldn't believe it took 5 minutes. They didn't listen to any facts. It was just people hollering in a room. So I learned how to appeal it. We won that case on appeal, and then that was about 14 years ago. And I said, I want to do more of this. And it took a long time to get a firm up and running just for pets, but we're there now. This is year 6. And I did not anticipate how many vet calls we would get. And initially, lawyers had told me, do not take these cases. There's no money to be made. And I would get the calls, and I had that in my head, and then it just clicked. Somebody has to take them. And it's not always about the money, believe it or not, for lawyers. And this is about making change one case at a time and getting answers. So, like Scott said, there's a great number that there isn't vet malpractice, but people just want the answers because the vet stops talking to them. And so that's one thing we really try to do, is get them an answer either way. And it gets busier every day.
It's sad, but it's also really great that you're doing this. And so I'm going to start jumping into some of these questions. But before I do, I want to clarify something that, Jeremy, you're going to need to clarify for us, because there's a huge confusion as to what malpractice is or what negligence is. So can you just define that for us before we go any further?
Sure. And I'll also do it with an example of each, which I think helps.
Perfect.
Let's talk about negligence. So I have a couple of cases right now, especially during COVID, where the pet parent went to the vet and the tech came out to get the pet. And when the pet was handed over to the vet tech, the handoff didn't go well, and the dog took off into the highway and was run over. So the vet tech's failure to properly hold on to the dog and secure the dog, that's negligence. You don't have to be any type of special professional to commit that kind of negligence. Another case I have, a cat goes into the office with her owner, and for an exam, and jumps out the window. And the vet looked at her and said, wow, never seen that before. Well, that's not a good enough answer. Why was the window open? You know, that's something every pet owner should look at, the windows when they go, especially with a cat, to a vet facility. But the vet didn't do anything wrong in terms of his or her experience or skill. They just failed to keep the window closed appropriately. So that's negligence. They owe a duty and they breached it. Now, malpractice is when, based on based on your actions, you fail to meet the minimum standard of care. And what that means is, and it's based on regional. So the standard in Boston is going to be different than the standard in Wyoming. And they do that to benefit the veterinarians, because in theory, veterinarians in Boston have access to great schools and great equipment. And in theory, people in small towns in the Midwest may not have that. The vets may not have all the top machinery and the best knowledge, which is amazing that they scale it downward for a standard of care. And it's a minimum standard of care. That means, what would half of the vets in your area have done under these circumstances? It's not like a human doctor's standard of care, which is very high. For a pet, what would 50% of the veterinarians do? I understand it because it's hard to diagnose a pet, but that's the malpractice. So for instance, we have a case where Aura, the dog, went in for a spay. And 3 years later, she's limping, still in pain, and nobody has been able to figure out what. Turns out that the vet left a sponge in the sponge kind of settled in an area where it's hard for her to bend her leg and to move properly. Well, that's malpractice. You had a duty that to maintain a minimum standard of care, which is 15 sponges in, 15 sponges out, and you failed. And what would half of the vets in your area have done? They would have counted, all of them, I think, would have counted the sponges and taken them out. So there's no intent, but mistakes happen, and that's malpractice.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that for our listeners, because Scott had alluded to the fact already that sometimes passion and grief take over, and we're not thinking clearly, and we just think, if the dog walks in and he has a heart attack on your floor, it's your fault. And so I wanted to make sure people knew that when we are talking about this, there's a difference between negligence and malpractice and what they are. And just because an animal dies in the care of a veterinarian isn't necessarily their fault. And so we need to clarify that. Okay, so let's look at this. So I have a question from Judy, and this is directed to you, Jeremy. She says, do you believe there is a possibility that sentient values and exemplary damages will one day become law in most states, considering a lot of groups?
As long as the Veterinary Medical Association's lobbying group is given the amount of airtime, and with legislators, with state legislators, we're up against that. They're the group that does not want, obviously, there to be more damages than just the replacement cost of your dog or the cost of restoring your dog or cat. But change is happening for a few reasons. One is legislators are getting younger, and there's a generation above me and one even above that where they didn't care for their animals growing up the way we did. So the legislators are going to become more they're going to want to modernize the way the law looks at our pets to bring it to something close to how we all feel about our pets. And lawyers who are now doing this work around the country, who are able to use case examples and get clients who have a fire behind them when this stuff happens and a passion to start getting sponsors for legislation to change the law. I really think in Massachusetts, we're changing a law this year for boarding facilities, which are unlicensed. And in most states, they're not. Boarding facilities are not licensed. And so you never know what you're going to get. But we have the right clients and the right cases, and we're going to get a law passed this year. So I can see that happening, but there's such we're up against a huge lobbying group who just wants to keep things the way they are. But they can't stay this way for long.
That's good. That's a good answer. I own a boarding facility. I have a license, but it's not going to protect the animals. I think we have to go a little further than that. I've always said that, like my license requires that the animal control come in and check me once or twice a year. They usually call me before they come, which is just stupid. Right. So I think there's a lot that needs to be, but I'm happy to hear that other states are starting to make it so that you have to be licensed. I hope that it will protect, because boarding facilities are another problem. Scott and I talked about that too. So Judy, I just want to tell you, I haven't said this yet, but Robb has this amazing coffee that he's going to be giving out to some of these random questions. And so we had agreed to give it to the first person that had left a question. So I will make sure, Judy, that we have your name, and you're going to be getting some free coffee from Jerry. And I hear it's amazing. I haven't tried it yet though, but Lori has. So congratulations. And these are going to be random. So any questions that come through, you may or may not be winning. So let's go to our next questions. So, hi, my name is Jane. My Gracie died 5 months ago. There is more than one vet involved, primary vet and colleagues, oncologists, ER because of diarrhea, and died in their care within 3 visits and 4 vets. Do I involve every vet in the 7-month time frame?
Well, I'll grab that first. This is why you have the records reviewed. So we don't know yet who made the errors during that 7 months. So this is why a lawyer, or in this case, if you go through Scott's group, a veterinarian first, will look at all the records and give an opinion, and then we'll know who didn't maintain the minimum standard of care and who did. And so some people, you'll have all the records, but that will narrow down who actually, if somebody made an error here, who did it. And it could be that it was a series of veterinarians. One thing is, if it's multiple veterinarians at the same facility, we're learning here to sue the facility only. If you sue the individual vets, first, it costs you more to file suit, but more important, behind the scenes, veterinary malpractice insurance gives the veterinarian, gives the professional the opportunity to sign off on a settlement. So it's very hard to get a veterinarian to sign off on a complaint that's against him or her for a settlement. But if you're suing just a facility, it's just easier. You don't have something against someone's name in a court pleading. And I am finding that there's an appreciation there that may, in an area where there's not a lot of damages, may be able to increase the damages a little bit if you did not name one of the veterinarians and just name the place where he or she works.
So this is exactly why Scott set Joey's Legacy up this way, is those files would be sent to someone like Dr. Cannizzaro, correct? And then she would review them, and then we would know further where we go with it, is to have one of the vets look at it and give their professional opinion. That's why we need these vets that are coming on board. And Scott, how many veterinarians do we have on board with Joey's Legacy?
Carrie, I apologize, just to let you know, Scott is having some technical difficulties, so we are chatting privately. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully he'll be back soon.
You. Okay, thank you. All right, so Scott's having a little bit of difficulty, so I'm going to go ahead and ask another question here. What can you do about a vet who had an animal grabbed out of the owner's arms and gave a vaccine that the owner continually said and even shouted, "No, I don't want my cat to have the shot." And then he proceeded to give the shot. She says that her appointment was actually just for chronic itching, and then he died a year later. The vet retired soon after. And then she said she did a complaint to the board, but it didn't do any good.
Wow.
Lori? Okay, we got it. Did you hear that, Dr. Cannizzaro?
I did, yes. I didn't know if you wanted me to chime in.
Yeah.
My first comment was, wow. You know, as a client, you have the right to decide what you do and don't want to have done. And when a veterinarian doesn't listen to your request, I can't even imagine that, honestly. And I can tell you as a homeopathic veterinarian that vaccinations often will make itching worse. So if an animal has an ailment, it's most important to treat that ailment first before considering any discussion about vaccinations. I'm not really sure, and I don't have the whole story, why a veterinarian would have been so hot and bothered about wanting to vaccinate the pet if the pet was presenting for a primary complaint of itching, because that should have been addressed and not the vaccinations. That said, I certainly have heard of many situations where people come in for a complaint about a problem an animal is having, their loved one is having, and the veterinarian says, "Oh, by the way, your pet is overdue for vaccinations," which isn't entirely a truth anyway. from the scope of things, there's no scientific evidence that annual vaccinations are necessary or even helpful for that matter. So to do all those things at the same time, I think is not very good medicine, in my opinion. I don't know if it rises to malpractice, but it's, in my opinion, not good medicine, and certainly could create some problems. But the biggest bother from what this individual is asking is the fact that the veterinarian simply didn't listen and went right ahead and gave vaccinations against the client's wishes and desires. That would be
Is there just to kind of add on to that, is there any laws that in order for a veterinarian to keep their license, like let's say rabies, for example, since that one is the only one that you have to give by law, are vets held to a standard where they're supposed to say, too bad, I have to vaccinate your dogs in my office and I have to by law? Is there anything that makes them have to do that?
Not really. I mean, every state has a different rule. For instance, the state of Florida allows me to write an exemption letter if a pet is too ill to receive a rabies vaccination. And you are correct, and the listeners should know that the only vaccination that is mandated in, to my understanding, every single state in the United States is the rabies vaccination, no other vaccines. The other ones are simply policies, and you being a boarding facility or a spa, I don't know what your policies are, but understand that if a boarding facility say, quote unquote, they require vaccinations, rabies and other vaccines, that it is a policy, it's not a law. As far as the rabies vaccination, if you read any of the vaccine inserts, it's incredibly important to appreciate that they all say to be given in healthy animals only. If an animal is not deemed healthy by a veterinarian, then we have every right to suggest that the pet should not be vaccinated. And again, it's my opinion that if an animal comes in for itching, allergies, liver failure, cancer, seizures, organ failures, or even major behavioral changes, they may not be well enough, or in my opinion, are likely well enough to receive a rabies vaccination. There are many states in the United States that will allow a licensed veterinarian to write what we call an exemption letter, and you can still get a license for your pet. They are still perfectly legal, but you do have to have a licensed veterinarian willing to do that. Most veterinarians don't want to do that. Either it takes too much time or they don't believe in it, or many of them just deem, well, itching isn't really a big deal, and I'm just going to vaccinate this pet anyway. Because again, understand that in allopathic or traditional medicine, there's no linking of diseases per se. Itching will be made worse by vaccinations. That's something we understand with further training in homeopathic medicine and other holistic modalities, mostly homeopathic medicine. So we understand from the all of the ancient work that's been done and up to date that there are many negative impacts to the choices that we make in treatment and or vaccination. So I look at every case individually, and I don't want to risk my license if I vaccinate your pet and your pet gets worse or dies from a vaccination I give. That would make me liable. And believe me, the reason the vaccine inserts exist is to exonerate the vaccine or the pharmaceutical company. It is not to protect the veterinarian. So if you think for any reason that, that you're going to get into the deep pockets of big pharma, they've done a really good job of distancing themselves. And I'm sure that Jeremy, I hope that he has knowledge of this. If he doesn't, I think it's an important thing to know and to work toward, work toward changes in this way, because most people are not aware that veterinarians are blindly just going along and actually putting themselves in harm's way, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to vaccinations and vaccinating animals that have existing illnesses or existing chronic diseases.
Can I jump in?
All right.
That's great info.
Yes.
I just want to add one thing about the inserts. You're so right. So there's not a lot of manufacturers of medication for pets, but those that do it, they are so insulated. And here's the problem. Where it harms us as pet owners and as lawyers is that they provide an insert. for the medication. I've never received an insert in any medication I've ever given to my dog. It never comes. Just like when we pick up our medicine at CVS or the pharmacy, you get pages of it. That's supposed to be given with every medication that your pet gets, especially the vaccination. The problem is the manufacturer doesn't send one for every bottle or they don't send a lot of them. So it's up to the vet to make sure that you get it. You rarely will get it. But what happens is it's a way for the manufacturers to pin everything on the vet by saying, oh, it's not our fault that your dog died from too much, from a Rimadyl poisoning. The vet should have told you that that's a side effect. Didn't you get the insert? And so it's this thing called a learned intermediary. And that's what they pin on the vet, saying, well, you're the learned intermediary. You're the one who's supposed to share this information. And whether you did or didn't, we're out of it. And I've had these drug manufacturers dismissed from cases because of that, because they're able to convince a judge, because they say it's all from the FDA. Our warnings are all FDA approved, and it just was up to the vet. And that's an unfair thing that the vet has to have the burden for.
It absolutely is unfair. And, veterinarians are essentially being thrown under the bus. And I had a case one time of a woman who brought her cat in who wasn't eating very well. And oh, by the way, her 14-year-old cat was due for annual vaccinations, which there's no scientific validity for. And within 1 hour, her cat experienced fluid filling up between the rib cage and the lungs, which is called pleural fluid. And the cat ultimately died. But it was odd, even the veterinarian that administered the vaccination, and it wasn't on purpose to harm her cat, still backed up, oh, that was too quick. There's no chance the vaccine had any effect on that. But her cat went in without that problem and left an hour later, hardly able to breathe, or less than an hour. It was incredibly quick. So we face I don't know that veterinarian personally. The client came to me to see if there was anything that I could do, and I tried, and unfortunately this kitty didn't make it. But my point is that I think my colleague, we get stuck in a rock and a hard place. I mean, I think my colleague wants to say, oh yeah, it was the vaccine I just gave to your cat. And we know we can't go back on the pharmaceutical company. So, I mean, I try to be entirely honest. I've given vaccinations that have had some negative effect for a client that insists that they want a rabies vaccination. But I'm transparent about it, saying I just don't know if this could cause your dog's other cruciate ligament to give out. And sure enough, it did in one case in particular. But she wasn't angry with me because I discussed it. But this isn't discussed often in veterinary medicine. And again, I may be referring to some things that are outside the purview of understanding of a lot of your audience, because in homeopathic medicine, we see some correlations of vaccinations and affinity for certain areas of the body. So I don't want to belabor this, but so if I'm saying things that seem a little odd to you, then it's not scientifically proven, but after so many years of practice and seeing this over and over again, you can't dismiss it as just a coincidence in various animals that are completely unrelated.
Yep. Yeah. But one of the things that Scott, we have talked about is that a lot of the people that come on and contact Scott are people who haven't had malpractice happen. And the vaccine argument that we were just talking about is important, because that's also why you're here, Scott, is we don't want you to have to go through malpractice. So when you're talking about vaccines and you're going in and, you had mentioned that there's not a list of what is unhealthy. The vet doesn't have a list that says allergies are an unhealthy animal, therefore I cannot vaccinate. So it's up to the pet parent to say, hey, I brought him in for an ear infection. I don't need the convenience right now, maybe to get the dog vaccinated at the same time. That's going to fall on the pet parent unless you have a great homeopathic veterinarian, which are hard to come by. So they are. I live in Orange County. We don't have one. So we have Dr. Jean Dodds. But
yeah, well, Dr. Jean Dodds is wonderful. She's not homeopathic, but she's very open and holistic minded. I send I send all my rabies titers there, and I also send all my thyroid tests there. You may have to seek a homeopathic veterinarian out of your area if they are willing to do phone consultations with you.
Yeah.
And when I do anything like that, you have to have a local vet that is going to cooperate and be able to do physical examinations, blood work, etc. I do educate my clients that way, that unfortunately at this time, because in my opinion, traditional or allopathic medicine has a lower bar or a higher bar, however you want to look at it, for health and wellness. And then you have to be an advocate for your pet, because otherwise you're going to go in and you will be given, I know animals that are given flea and tick medications and their pet has a history of seizures. It's just contraindicated. The vet should know, but many vets don't think it's a big deal. And, you know, I don't know that that rises to the level of malpractice, sadly, but I feel like everybody should know. And I'm not trying to be a Nazi against the pharmaceutical company per se, but even they have an insert saying it's not a good idea. Don't give this medication to animals with a history of seizures. So that's not even homeopathic. But a homeopathic veterinarian is going to have a totally different standard of health and wellness, in my opinion, and so would a human homeopath. So, you know, I encourage people to look into that more, because it's one of the holistic modalities that many people are less familiar with, and getting more familiar with it. I think that you're going to find a better path of health for your pet, if I could be an advocate for that.
I agree with you 100%. Okay, so we have a question coming across from Lisa. She says, when a place has multiple complaints, Scott, I know you've seen this, multiple complaints, lawsuits, and police calls made against it. And then she says, they told me they only care about case by case. I think she might be talking about the board. And then she says, there have been tons of issues at the vet and I raised them all up, yet I received not enough evidence. Is that something that we see a lot, Jeremy? Just not enough evidence?
Well, we do. And the reason, so one thing is, you don't want to mistake quantity for quality. It's so easy to make a complaint online or something, but the problem is the vets control the evidence and they're tipped off in advance. Hey, you know, we're going to get your records. And make no mistake that these records are altered at times by certain vets. There's scratch outs, there's whiteouts. That you look at the handwriting, some's darker, some is lighter. If you make a complaint to them, I have one right here, that we think Cushing's disease was the cause of death. Well, suddenly in the failure to diagnose it, in the records, in several places, it says told owner could be Cushing's, owner declined test. In several places, told owner, even if it's Cushing's, I wouldn't treat it. All these things that help the vet. So when they're in control of the evidence, yeah, there's a problem. There's rarely enough evidence when, because the records are kept in such a way that it's just ripe for adulterating them. And not saying it goes on everywhere, but I've certainly seen that. And so doesn't surprise me that there's not enough evidence. Sometimes it disappears. But they're supposed to give you a record when you ask for it, not 3 hours later, not in 2 days, not send me a letter. A pet owner asks for the record and you get the record with all the diagnostic tests and radiological reports.
What would be a reasonable time to expect that? Immediately?
Today.
Today?
Oh, if I'm the pet owner and I want my records, you go there and you say, I want my records. And if they say, well, doctor's not in, it has nothing to do with the doctor being in. Just get the records. I want the records now. And it should not take 6 or 7 hours. And that's what leads people to not trust veterinarians when you ask for this stuff and you don't get it right away. So suddenly you're thinking, even though it might not be true, you're thinking there's something up here. And now you're going down this path that maybe could have been avoided if the front office just said, okay, here's the records. But it's also the insurers behind the scenes. There's only a few insurance companies that take care of vets, and they tell them all, turn your back. They do not care about the veterinarian's reputation with their client or other clients. They only care about minimizing how much they pay out. So they train them, they tell them, do not talk to patients. And I'm not saying they tell them to doctor records, but there are things in place to make sure that their records are reviewed before they get to us. And that's not right.
Wow. Dr. Cannizzaro, is there any incidences where you wouldn't be able to give a client their records immediately?
Well, actually, that's a really good question. I work alone extensively, so I would have a difficult time getting records, and it depends on the volume of the records. Some of the records I have are a phone directory thick. Some of the records I have are only a couple of pages. I always ask for a copy of handwritten doctor notes, including any and all test results when I'm taking a case on. So if a client comes to me for homeopathic treatment, I ask for those. And I'll say to Jeremy that it's interesting to me because a lot of times clients are told, well, we have to get the permission from the veterinarian first. And I'll tell you that if a client asks for a copy of my records, I give them a copy of my records. It may take me a day or so to do so because I have to personally copy all those records. And if I'm seeing patients that day, then I may not be able to do it right away. Most of these practices are going to have multiple employees and they would be able to do that and copy the records in time. I also want to add to Jeremy that I hope my records never get in front of him because I am notorious for writing crap in the margin and on the side and slipping things in, crossing stuff out. So, I mean, I've done all of that, and it doesn't have to do with doctoring my records. So, and my handwriting is fairly legible, but I keep handwritten records unless I'm working on a homeopathic workup. That portion of it is on my computer. But my clients know all the time, they're always welcome to a copy of my records. I have no problems with that, but I also spend a considerable amount of time explaining things to people. But even that, I've still had difficulties. So whether that's a communication breakdown or just a very, a very upset and grieving client, I can't answer that definitively. But I will say to Jeremy, because I've been on the other side of it, that if there is a complaint against us, we are encouraged. I shouldn't say encouraged. The insurance company basically says it's up to us. The problem is that we have been told by most of the attorneys behind the scene not to talk to the client. And I get that. When you have an extremely angry and upset client that already feels that you've done something wrong and they've already made up their mind, it's extremely difficult to reach out and speak to them, not because you don't want to, not because I don't want to, but what do we say to a grieving person that's already made up their mind? So I would always be open to that, but I'm going to tell you, and Jeremy, because you represent people, I'm going to follow the advice of the lawyer that, is helping me because I'm not a lawyer and I'm trying to do my best. But it's a very hard situation because I would like to be able to speak to people if they're upset. And if this is outside of any kind of board complaint, I have reached out to clients and called them and asked them about their upset, whatever it might be. And thank God it doesn't happen really often. I guess I make it sound like it does. But I do reach out and ask because it's an opportunity for me to be able to improve something if there was something I could have done better. And
I don't understand that part because half the people who call me wouldn't if two things happened. The vet said, I'm sorry this happened, here's a refund. A refund. No, vets do not want to give back a refund. What do you have to lose? I mean, even if so you have a chance to get rid of somebody from hating you and blaming you if you say, I'm sorry it didn't go that way, the way you wanted it to. Even if whether you did something wrong or not, or if you just want to keep if you want to calm the situation. And now I know everybody gets paid for effort and not results. Sometimes a refund. So somebody comes to you, not to you, to a vet, and they with a dental issue, and they leave with a dead dog. So they feel like, why did I just charge for the dental surgery? And I refund the money, and the cases will diminish. It doesn't make the behavior any better, but I really am finding a refund it would quiet a lot of calls on the veterinary end, because that says we listened, we heard you. Not every case, but I know you are being guided by other professionals who say absolutely not. But what's the worst going to happen? You're going to get sued for the refund plus a few $1,000s. It's not like these are $1 million cases yet.
I want to respond to that because Jeremy, I don't disagree with you entirely, but for some people, it's not about a refund. And I do know vets that have refunded. The other thing, and the insurance company actually says it's up to us if we choose to refund or not. If we can make that decision at the point of care, if something goes badly, I think that that's definitely a good idea. I don't disagree with that. The other thing is that we have been informed about, because I don't know how much you know about our side of it, or whatever. The attorneys will often say to us that you have to be careful about refunding, especially well after the fact, because it can be, people will construe that as an admission of guilt. And if we could have better communication, if you understand what I'm saying, that would make such a difference, so that if we could refund a client, for instance, and actually have a meeting of the minds, if this could really happen, then I agree with you. I think that could really happen. There's too much insulation. Everybody's tiptoeing around because they're scared about what's going to happen. They're scared about how that's going to look. And again, it's a complete breakdown in communication. So if we just refund a client and there's just not really much communication there, sometimes that doesn't resolve very much. And sometimes it really can resolve things. It just depends if we can communicate during the course of that event.
So let's just kind of gear this a little bit more towards what I want to kind of talk with Scott for here a few minutes. Scott, what are we going to do? What have you found? What direction is Joey's legacy to try to get the board to listen to? What are we going to do? We know this is a problem. We have veterinarians, fabulous veterinarians that are willing to say it's a problem. We have attorneys who are bombarded with these cases. What do we do?
So what Jerry's book is all about, to me, is the two main issues when it comes to truth and integrity in veterinary medicine. The first one has everything to do with a veterinarian making a conscious decision to attempt to deceive the pet parent when things don't go right in the exam room or in the surgical suite. So many of our members, victims, have told me, if the veterinarian had just been straightforward with what happened, we're all adults, we're all mature, we can handle it. We won't be happy, we'll be angry, we'll be depressed, we'll be sad for a long time. I may never get over the loss of my dog, and I think a lot of people echo that sentiment. So if the practitioner comes to the pet parent after a failure in the surgical suite and brings the pet parent into the private area, I'm sorry to have to tell you this is exactly what happened, and we lost your pet. So many of our members have told us if they had just done that, they wouldn't be outside with picket signs outside the veterinary practice. They wouldn't be slandering and defaming the practice on Google and Yelp. They might not even be interested in pursuing the matter legally, but they feel demoralized and denigrated by the fact that you've had a tragic situation which is now exacerbated by the practitioner coming to them and saying something that isn't true when they find that out. That just infuriates them, and that's the trigger for retaliation in so many different ways. Okay, so for the percentage of veterinarians that choose that path, and again, 85% of our people that come to us say have never had that kind of experience, never even had a bad experience. But for that smaller percentage that has, they are willing to go as far as they need to get even with the practitioner. Okay, and that of course includes filing a complaint with the vet board. And of course that leads into problem number 2. That's a good segue into problem number 2. All 50 vet boards are basically, in my opinion, comprised of disingenuous professionals who practice their craft during the day, do a great job, treat their patients very well, and they're well admired and they're well respected. And then in their alter egos, as vet board members, they become indifferent, they become two-faced, they become insincere, and in some cases, they're very devious. They tend to coddle the practitioner that's accused of wrongdoing. They protect their license as best they can. Joey's vet, it was a 3-time loser when it came to Joey. That was his 3rd sustained complaint, and they dismissed it at the final hearing because he went up to the desk and sat there and sobbed like a child. I won't do it again. And they bought it. And that's not the only practitioner that happens to, I can tell you that. So what we need is the governing authority in each state to make sure they administer their duties in a firm and fair fashion, instead of just sloughing everyone off and $1,000 fine and a year probation, which doesn't impede their ability to practice in the state of Florida anyway. I'm not sure about other states, but they can practice without any hesitation or without any interference from the state. And so when it comes to what would really mitigate a lot of this stuff, it's the practitioners that are not totally truthful and transparent with the pet parent, and the vet boards just administering their duties and practice and administering disciplinary action in a firm and fair fashion. If you could mitigate those two in a very strong way, Jerry wouldn't need to write his book.
Do we need another governing agent? It seems like we have the veterinarians seeing the vet over the veterinarians.
Right. You got, in the state of Florida, you've got 7 members, 5 are veterinarians, 2 are consumer advocates. And I still would like to hear a lucid, intelligent explanation as to why a vet board needs a majority of veterinarians who obviously are who have a propensity to possibly be biased toward their colleague who's being possibly wrongly accused. And so I think there should be a more even distribution of members on every vet board that don't have a propensity toward being biased or prejudiced toward their own colleagues. And I don't see a reason for 5 veterinarians or a majority.
As the public, I guess, Jeremy, this would be to you. Can we do that? Can we pass some laws that the veterinary board has, more like a jury of different people in different backgrounds? Is that something that we can do, that we can pass as a law and get that to change?
I have a law firm dedicated to pets. We can do anything we want to do. If you can think it, you can do it. And to what Scott said, I have a suit against a vet right now, and I decided to watch a hearing. I watched a meeting last month, and she's the president of the board of licensure for veterinarians. How can that be? And it has to see, people don't know how, until they've had to deal with it, pet owners, how ineffective that is. Now, I know with lawyers, the Board of Bar Overseers, you fear them every day because they don't take your side. They're not forgiving. You will be suspended. And you have to have that mindset that you answer to this higher authority. Veterinarians know who do they answer to. They don't have to pay out a lot of money when they make mistakes, and they don't have to go before somebody and really defend their license. We are so overpowered by the veterinarians. Pet owners, we're fighting back. Our motto is it's time to bark back. And by doing that, they're going to be better at their job. They're going to be better. We're going to improve the standard of veterinary care by holding them more accountable. So yes, laws can change.
Well, I think that's kind of our first step, is trying to get the veterinary board to be a little bit more, which is what Scott and Jerry are really working on, is this documentary, because we need to get this. Somebody had written a question earlier. Why don't we know about this? Why can't I just Google veterinary malpractice? Why isn't it all over the place? And that's where the documentary comes in, right, Jerry?
That's right. I'm dealing with a documentarian who has won 9 Emmys and has done some great documentaries that have been on BBC and History Channel I just kind of lucked into him through one of Joey's members a year ago. We've talked on the phone several times, and we now have a fundraiser in order to get the documentary made, from which he will then take it to Sundance Film Festival and other film festivals and sell it to whatever channels might be interested, like Animal Planet, National Geo. I keep getting a message on my screen that says my internet connection is unstable, which makes two of us. But if I lose everybody, I'll apologize, and that'll be it. But I don't know if I'm going to lose you or not, but it keeps popping up. But what Scott's done is he's quite a marketeer in addition to being passionate about this subject. And he does a lot of things to try to raise funds. Out of the 2,300 members, we have about 50.
Scott, you want to take over?
Donations. Got it? Pardon me?
Okay, so
We'll let Jerry, you're going in and out, so we'll let Scott finish up that.
Sounds fine.
okay, so well, what I'll say about it is we have almost 2,300 members. We've got a number of them that are stepping up and making donations toward this film. The documentarian, as Jerry mentioned, has won 9 Emmys. I lived in the same hometown as he did for a long time. He's very professional, and I'm sure he'll do a great job getting the word out about this. And we want to also make sure that the message is presented appropriately, accurately, but yet with great passion. We want to maintain the idea that most veterinarians entered the profession because they do have a profound love for animals and not for the money necessarily. And many of them have maintained their ethics and standards over the years. And we only seek to focus on a small subset of the veterinary industry. And like I said, we don't want anyone to ever believe that this is about the entire industry, because it is farthest thing from the truth. Are you back, Jerry?
I'm here. I can hear everything, but I keep getting that error.
All right, why don't you keep going? Why don't you keep going?
Well, like I said, I'm working with a guy named John Biffar, and it would be worth going to YouTube and searching for him. His last name was Biffar, and his company is Dreamtime
I know he's having some bad.
Entertainment. And you can see a lot of the work that he does. But as he told me, we don't need to do this halfway. We need to do it first class, spend the money it takes. And he's got a plan. He's sending us plans right now as to where the budget is going to go. It's expensive. You can't get two guys with their iPhone to go out and make a documentary. They got film crews and travel expenses and all kinds of stuff, and then going to the film festivals. But he is very, very helpful, and he's very, very interested.
Okay.
And I would encourage anyone to go and watch that. If there's anybody in the audience out here that would like to donate to the cause. My book is Scott's attempt to get exposure, and a book will get you exposure, but it's not going to be the same kind of exposure that a documentary on the History Channel or something would get. And that's really what this, not just Joey's, it's what the entire country needs to get, because like I said, most people like me, I've been going to the same veterinary clinic for 35 years. I've never had a problem. And most of us didn't know there was one, but there is.
There definitely is one, and the documentary is where we're heading and trying to get more exposure. Even if veterinarians watch it and they kind of feel like, yeah, I'm overworked, I'm doing things too quickly, I'm not taking the precautions I need to do, I'm not doing these things, it's still an eye-opener and can do a lot in helping us. The ultimate goal is to protect animals. So the more information we can get out, the more we can say to vets, hey, we're watching you. Someone's watching you. You're not going to be protected anymore. We're going to be changing the laws. We've got attorneys involved. We've got veterinarians involved. I think that's our best bet. But in order to do that, I know, Scott, we got to raise a lot of money, right? So it's going to have to come in with some donations. So Lori's putting up a place for you guys to donate. I encourage you. you know, a lot of times we cannot bring our pets, well, we can't bring our pets back, and we can't fix things a lot of times. In fact, there's one question on here, and she talks about the death of her dog, whose name is Molly. And her question was, she's gone to so many different veterinarians, and the vet actually took verbal responsibility for Molly's death and issued reimbursements for the cost, but no attorneys will take on the case for her. So she's struggling. And I have to say, it saddens me that there may not be any route for her to go, but in memory of Molly, this may be something you can do, is get the laws changed. I know a lot of times that's all we can do, is fight back so that it doesn't continue to happen again. But she did want to address that question to you, Jeremy, so I want to make sure that I do that. Is there something else she can do when, you know, no one will take her case and she has a veterinarian who took responsibility for it?
Here's the problem with that. She has no damages now. So the flip side of accepting a refund is that now you have no money damages. So the lawyer is saying, what can I sue for? See, if you have the money damages, then you can sue for emotional distress for pet owners, which is available in some cases now in other replacement costs and stuff. But now she has no fundamental piece to her case because she's not looking for the cost of care because she got it. So that's the other side, is if you take the refund, you're kind of compromising your ability to do more. But here's where you would go to your board and notify them. But again, that doesn't really lead to much.
So once you've accepted the reimbursement in cash for the cost of the vet visit, you can't go back and say, well, wait a second, it's just kind of a done deal.
You can sue for anything, but the biggest part of the damages is gone. And you could go for, if there were additional costs because of the malpractice or negligence that another vet had to do that you had to spend, now you can go for that money because you deserve. But you could still have a case and it'll just be discounted by the amount you've already received. And for a lot of lawyers where the damages are small anyway, now that you're not going to get those damages, they're not going to be able to grab a piece of that, because most lawyers take this on a contingency fee basis, meaning we only get paid if we recover money. So if all that money's been refunded, there's nothing to get paid from, and that's a disincentive for some lawyers to pursue the case.
Is there a possibility, I may be misspeaking here, but in Florida, aren't pets considered a little more than property? I thought they had a law that kind of placed them in the middle somewhere. Was that Florida? Or
so
not quite children, not human life, but not a lamp.
So we're seeing this is evolving out of custody cases, first out of cruelty cases, because the laws are so protective of becoming more and more protective of dogs and cats. But in custody cases, people break up, they battle over the dog, cat, horse. States like New York, they're starting to look at what's in everybody's best interest. Some states are starting to look, Rhode Island is more advanced, what's in the best interest of the dog? And that's where you can make these arguments about, that's where the pet is starting to have standing in custody cases. So once we can get them, the pets to be looked at as more than property or a special type of property, I think going for pets' rights is too overwhelming right now. But just to have them have a special type of meaning under the law is where we're headed. And several states are doing that. Massachusetts is way behind. Florida may be there, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I had heard.
So. I don't think so.
No.
I think if I'm not mistaken, in the state of Florida, they're just considered property.
Jesus.
Or chattel.
God, that just makes me so angry. I get angry every time I hear it. And I own a business, and people have told me, Carrie, you don't want the law to change. I'm like, no, yes, I do. Yes, I do. If I'm negligent,
even
and
as a veterinarian, I know how my pets are for me. You know, they're my lifeline and my, and I'm sure all of you know this, and I'm sure all the listeners do too, that it's often said, honestly, that when you lose your pet, it's almost worse than losing a family member. That
Yeah.
that actually, if you talk to therapists, that it's actually more traumatic for people. And all animals on this planet are sentient beings. I find it really difficult. It was shocking to me to find out, a long time ago, that they were just considered property or chattel.
And
Yeah.
I just want to jump in real quick about the loss. One reason is worse than losing a family member is because this pet owner guilt. If it's a vet related loss, and forget about it because you feel so responsible. I chose the vet. I listened to the vet, and I console people by saying they're the authority, they're the professional. You went to the right place, but people carry this around. We have a case that's 3 years old and the owner still cries because she wishes she hadn't gone to that vet. That's a problem, and I don't know how to fix it, but it's get a second opinion. If you have time to get a second opinion is one thing, but it's a shame that in the blame game that pet owners are really blaming themselves quite a bit, and that's hard to get over.
Well, they love their
Yeah, I
animals
think-
so much, I understand.
Yeah, definitely the guilt of why didn't I see this? Why did I go there? All of the Scott knows, I know, anyone who's been involved in it knows that, and that's why we're here. That's why Scott's here, because I'm sure guilt has just, even though it's not, it just, you question everything that you do. And that's why we're doing these. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to do it in one evening. It's very late where you guys are. It's almost 9 o'clock. So I'm going to have to wrap this up, but Scott and I have agreed we're going to do this more often so that we can continue. There's lots of questions that came through and I can't possibly get to all of them, but I do want to just thank you guys all so much for taking the time out to be here. I can't encourage you enough to donate for this documentary. If you want to see change, this is your chance. Even if it's $5, it's going to put together an amazing documentary with an amazing documentarian. This is not just some little side gig, and it's going to make change. So we need to do that. We'll be on here with different veterinarians, and hopefully Dr. Cannizzaro and Jeremy will be coming back with us throughout the months so that we can continue to do this and get more of these questions answered. Lori has put up all of the information that you need in order to contact. I encourage you. I know this is the first time I met you, Dr. Cannizzaro, but you don't know this, but I'm very holistic as well. My boarding facility does not require Bordetella vaccines and all of this gobbly-goopy crap that you talk about. I do have some laws that I have to abide by for my kennel license, but Bordetella, thank God, is not one of them. So I definitely do not require that. And I have some things I can do with parvo and distempered per age. So I encourage you, if Dr. Cannizzaro is doing phone consultations, trust me, there's very few veterinarians that understand what you understand. And so I'm going to direct people to you because it's tough. It's tough. So
Well, thank
Jeremy,
you.
hopefully.
It's been an honor.
Go ahead.
It's been an honor. I sincerely appreciate it. And if we can help educate and spread the word. And I just want to plug too that anybody who's interested, I don't know, I think the documentary is going to be amazing. Education and obtaining information is power. So it's incredibly important to support any way you can to get information, education, and again, that will give us power to make the changes. And I say to Jeremy just quickly also that it would be nice for the board not to be comprised of all the veterinarians. They aren't that friendly to a homeopathic veterinarian, I could tell you that. But that said, somebody that has a fairer look at the law, maybe has some information or knowledge, would be better individuals to be on the board. In addition to, I just, there's so much room for improvement. So
much
thank you.
room.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, and I'd be delighted to come back. And thank you, Scott.
Awesome.
You're amazing also. Every one
Thank
of
you,
you.
Doctor. Thank you,
Thank you.
Doctor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time out and coming on and answering these questions. They're difficult. I wish I could have got more questions, but your answers are so thorough, and it's just a blessing to have some veterinarians, especially because I do know that there's not a lot of money in this for you. There's not really, we're not getting a lot of money. So it's just an honor to know not only veterinarians that are willing to do this, but attorneys that are doing this practically for free. So thank you so much for taking your time out and being here.
Happy to. Thanks for having me. And Scott, this is all because of you. Look what you're accomplishing.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Real proud,
Appreciate
real
it.
proud of that.
Jeremy, I have a quick question. Other than Massachusetts, are you licensed in any other states?
I am not. However,
Okay.
like you, I have developing affiliates in other states. So we try to find a home for any issue that comes up.
Can you help a case in Rhode Island?
Yeah, I can try. Rhode
Okay.
Island is tough. Rhode Island, New Hampshire, I just can't find anybody
Okay.
like me.
Okay.
But Rhode Island's a tough one.
All right. I'm going to email you on a case.
Okay,
All right. Thank you.
happy to try.
That was really nice of you, Scott, to try to help her out. Thank you for doing that. I wish I could have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know exactly. So hopefully we can get Molly's mom some help. Jerry, awesome for you to be here. Thank you for giving out the coffee. I think we're just going to go ahead and send some coffee to people that were in here. I'll get you all of the information. We weren't able to get to 12 questions. It's a very complicated situation, so we can't just ask a lot of questions. We had enough to give out 12 coffee, but we'll keep doing it. But thank you, Jerry, for being here.
You're welcome. And if anybody on the panel likes coffee, let me know. I'll send you some.
Will do.
There you go.
Awesome.
And of course, Scott, just like Jeremy said, none of this, I mean, the love for Joey that you have that brought you here is just, it's really amazing to watch. And this is all you.
Well, thank you. I'm very flattered. And, it was tough getting started, but after a while, it started to become a reality for me. And it's basically my life right now. And it has been for almost 4 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, change is happening. It is happening. The documentary is going to happen. We're gonna be here. Scott and I and Jeremy will be here quite often. We're going to be bringing in different vets. So please join us again. If your questions weren't asked, they can be asked again. I promise you, we'll be back on here answering these questions as much as we can, giving you up-to-date information about the documentary. That is something we're going to start doing as we get more and more into these roundtable discussions about Joey's legacy. We'll be giving you updates on the documentary. How is it going? Where is filming going to be taking place? All of those kind of things. I know if there's people whose stories were in the book, I know Jerry is still trying to reach out to getting people who want to be in the documentary. But again, we need to spread this. So we need you guys to share this on your Facebook pages, share this on your Instagrams, everything that you can do to try to help us get this documentary made, which will in turn do what we want to do, get the veterinary board to listen to what we're trying to say, is that these animals are dying in cases that they may not need to be dying in. So, but I will end this with saying that I have worked in my career probably with 15 different veterinarians, and only one of them out of that 15 did I think should have his license revoked. So I know I come out and I talk about this a lot because I've seen it a lot, but like Scott has said, I have great respect for veterinarians. I really do. It's a hard industry to be in. I was a vet tech for many years. It's sometimes very thankless job, and it requires a lot of hours. I'm not here to bash veterinarians. I'm just here to help them make their own community better. And I think that's what Scott is here to do too.
Absolutely.
So
Of course.
yeah. And we're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. So, all right, everybody, have a good evening. I'll see you in the next roundtable.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good
Thank you.
night.